Now, over to traffic for your morning commute. A collision on King Charles Freeway is causing major delays. Every route you take seems to lead you to the same destination. A nightmare of gridlock and drive-through coffee. And all of this makes you wonder, where have we gone wrong as a species? What horrible mistakes led us to this slow apocalypse of identical metal boxes? Sometimes I wonder if I'll ever escape this perpetual cycle of congestion on my way to report on the traffic. Also, there's construction on Wayne Gretzky Drive, so try to find alternate routes. Back to you, Steve. Anyone who's ever been inside a motor vehicle knows that it's the ultimate in freedom. That is, until there's another car on the road. Then it's a nightmare, especially if that other driver sucks at driving as much as I do. We accept traffic as part of our daily life, but it not only sucks and is super expensive, it's actively killing the planet. Even if all those cars were electric, you would still need roads, tires, steel, and not to mention tons of energy to move all of those single occupancy vehicles around. Not the most efficient use of our resources. But it turns out traffic jams are not an inevitable consequence of modernity. They're actually a policy choice fought for by decades of industry lobbying and PR. So where should we be going, and how did we get here? Hi, I'm three-time Alberta driver's test failure, Hazel Thayer, and this is the Climate Breakdown. I did the thing!
Rolling. Maybe after this.
For practically all of human history, the street was where things happened. You could go outside where you lived, buy stuff, go to work, and you could cross the road without fear of becoming a crunchy flesh pancake. And then a unique invention came along and changed all that. It was called the horseless carriage, or the no-horse carriage for short, or for even shorter, the car. And people loved it.
When cars really started to become common in city streets between about 1910 and 1925, it was a real takeoff period for the automobile. In that era, it was a very painful, sometimes disastrous adjustment.
That's Peter Norton. He's
an associate professor of history at the University of Virginia. I'm the author of Fighting Traffic and Autonorama. The people who were getting injured and killed were overwhelmingly people walking, sometimes people riding bikes, disproportionately children, and the death tolls in individual cities are just shocking to see.
Okay, admittedly, our love affair with cars was a little bit more like a rom-com where at first they don't like each other because the guy is loud and smelly and constantly murdering children, but he can change. Or more accurately, he can change all of us. The use case for cars made a lot of sense in the wide open country, but in the city, where most people live, there were easier and cheaper options like walking, cycling, tram, horse, and, according to Assassin's Creed, parkouring. That meant that car manufacturers, road builders, and auto dealers, at the time called motordom by the press, needed to take out the competition if they wanted to sell more cars. So they invented a little something called jaywalking. See? I did it! Okay.
So motordom had a problem, and that problem was they wanted people to stop walking wherever they wanted to in streets. They recruited Boy Scouts to hand out cards to people who were walking in streets, and these cards would say, "Did you know you're jaywalking? In the automobile age, this is no longer okay."
Now that the streets had officially become the domain of cars, it was time to expand the auto empire. And that meant cities and the burbs surrounding them had to get a lot less walkable, transitable, and bikeable so that they could become the sole domain of the car. Now, I know what you're thinking. What's not to love about all of this beautiful suburban sprawl? And of course, if you love your suburban neighborhood, that's great. Don't let some blue-haired car hater tell you how to live your life. What you do with this information is up to you. So here's our millennial-friendly listicle of reasons why building cities for cars and not people kinda sucks. Number 3, a giant footprint. You know we here at the Climate Breakdown love a good carbon footprint. But we don't just mean carbon, we also mean geographical. this kind of development takes up a lot of room.
So post-1945, we see car-dependent suburbia exploding.
Here in Canada, most of our recent population growth has been right here in the burbs. That means we've decided to swap out our stupid trees for more awesome roads. Fewer paradises, more parking lots. Hello, Joni Mitchell? We did it! Which also means that we're further away from each other. Studies show that being physically isolated from your friends and neighbors is, scientifically speaking, kind of a bummer. And yet we do it for our real best friend, car. Car. But who cares? Canada is huge. We have tons of room for roads and parking lots and highways and parking lots and big-ass houses and parking lots and interchanges and parking lots and maybe. But only 4% of Canada is arable land suitable for growing crops, and yet that percentage is shrinking as developers buy up primo farmland to build houses like this. Food security, who needs food anyway? Not people in the future, that's for sure. Number 2, it's so expensive. You may be saying, what are you talking about? Suburbs are the only place I can afford to buy. Have you seen house prices in Canada's cities? But there's an irony around being able to afford housing outside of the city because it's super expensive to build everything else associated with car-dependent suburbs. Roads, sewers, pipes, parking lots, wires, services, and more. With such low density, property taxes often don't cover the costs. And if that sounds financially irresponsible to you, you're 100% right. So how do you stay financially solvent as a car-dependent suburb, expand outwards, and charge developer fees? Then get the province to build you more roads for free. In other words, the prices you get in the suburbs are artificially low because of, say it with me, subsidized, unsustainable growth.
Suburbanization was subsidized in multiple ways. Living in the city was getting harder because the cities were being decimated to make way for highways and then so-called urban renewal.
And finally, number 1, you gotta have a car. Want food? Get in the car. Want your kids to get to school? You're their personal Uber. Want your car payment bill from the mailbox? It's car o'clock, baby. And this is by design when you zone districts for one purpose, just for housing, just for shopping, just for working. Car ownership is basically mandatory.
Car dependency was being enforced as increasingly traffic engineers were planning on the assumption that you have a car. They could design your world in such a way that you're assumed to have a car.
It's kind of like a tax, but they don't call it a tax. They call it car payments, insurance payments, maintenance, gas. The average cost of car ownership in Canada is around $1,000 per month. That's the private tax you're paying to access the basics of life. And that's $1,000 per vehicle, but Lord knows, each adult requires their own car. And instead of those taxes going to your community to pay for neat stuff like clean water and garbage collection and education for your kids, that money pays for stock dividends and a first-class ticket to choking on car fumes in traffic. Neat, huh? It's almost like these big companies got together and figured out the best way to design a city not for the people living in the city, but for their own bottom lines. And that's because they super did. So what's the solution? Welcome to the world of new urbanism. Dense, mixed-use neighborhoods you can safely walk or bike in. Public transit is well-funded, accessible, and affordable, making it the fastest and cheapest option for most travel. And if you think this is a crazy idea, it's not. It's already the norm in places like the Netherlands or the most walkable city in Alberta, the West Edmonton Mall. You're not even allowed to drive a car in there. Look, they even have high-speed rail. There's a reason why real estate listings give walkability scores, because everyone values walking around their neighborhood to get things or just because it's nice. And that is why my rent in Victoria is $1 million a month. And when buildings use high-efficiency standards and passive design, you reduce the demand for energy, which keeps you comfortable all year round, saves you money, and is better for the climate. Even drivers benefit because if more people are on trams, trains, and buses, traffic doesn't become a backed up mess twice a day. And the best part is that they won't have to be dealing with terrible drivers like me. I did the thing! I'm trying my best. There are no downsides to this. Zero. So why aren't we building more walkable, bikeable, mixed-use, dense communities? Local municipalities have things like zoning, parking requirements, and a whole bunch of other regulations that make creating these kinds of communities literally illegal. That's right, kids. If you want your city to stop being a sprawling car prison where you can safely walk or bike places, you're an outlaw.
We have endless volumes of rules that say you can't build here, you can't have this tall of a building, you can't have this many tenants in your building. These kinds of rules really practically outlaw proximity, and therefore the geographic footprint of the people of a given metropolitan area is constantly expanding because there's all of these obstacles against density.
So how do we reduce traffic when we've built our cities over the last 70 years to prioritize cars over people?
Density tends to happen naturally where it's permitted to happen. Old-fashioned cities tended to be dense in part because there weren't rules against it. So just permitting density, I think, would be the first thing to do. And one area where we're really failing everybody is in giving them good choices about how to get around. We can realize, for example, that an electric vehicle doesn't have to mean an electric car. An electric vehicle can mean an electric bike, can also mean an electric streetcar, as it did 100 years ago. Finally, I think people should be calling for making walking and public transportation and bicycling practical wherever it can be practical. That could be improved almost everywhere, and the cost of doing so tends to be so much less than the cost of trying to relieve traffic congestion for cars.
So there you have it. Traffic is basically a scam. A scam invented to enrich oil companies and car manufacturers and enabled by bad government policy. But we can design better cities that let you keep more of your money while also reducing our impact on the planet and getting you where you need to go more efficiently. Thanks for watching the Climate Breakdown. If you want to see more videos like this, let us know in the comments and subscribe. A few shout outs today. Check out Peter Norton's books Fighting Traffic to learn more about the history of how cars took over our lives, and Autonorama for how big tech's dumb ideas like self-driving cars probably won't work. Second, if you want to learn more about new urbanism, here are 2 YouTube channels you should check out. Strong Towns, also a book, and one of my favorites, Not Just Bikes. The Climate Breakdown is a production of The Goose in partnership with the Weather Network. I'm Hazel Thayer. You can follow me at Hazel Thayer basically everywhere. See you next time.